My name is Felicia Haberfeld. My maiden name was Felicia Spirer. I was born, raised, and educated in Krakow, Poland. I come from a very large family, and I had a wonderful childhood and youth. I attended a private high school.
What was your earliest recollection, Felicia?
From my childhood?
Yes, from your childhood.
I think my grandmother, whom I adored and who loved me and spoiled me. We lived in the same house in a different wing, and my grandparents' house was the center of the family's activities. We were very close. My grandmother, the way I remember her, was one of the most beautiful women and the wisest woman I have ever known. And she left a lasting impression on me, for sure. After I graduated from a private high school, because the public high schools were reserved for daughters of federal employees or city employees or state employees, I attended University of Krakow, and I graduated with a degree of Master's in Philosophy.
When you were a little girl in Krakow, what was it like there?
I had a most beautiful childhood. I was raised among 4 brothers of my mother and 1 sister of my mother. And all my uncles had a lot of friends. My oldest uncle, who was an attorney in Krakow, was the secretary of the Zionist organization. And his best friend was Dr. Ignacy Schwarzbart, a very well-known Zionist leader who also was a member of the Polish parliament. And I grew up among those men, really students of law, and I was always impressed by them. And I remember that I was sitting on a red velvet couch when they had their meetings and studying for their exams. As a matter of fact, I met Dr. Schwarzbart after the war in New York. He came there from the Zionist Congress as a refugee. So I had a wonderful childhood, and inspired by my uncles. I want to backtrack. The same uncle who was the secretary of the Zionist organization in Krakow was also the co-founder of the Polish Jewish newspaper in Krakow, Nowy Dziennik. And I joined the Zionist youth organization at a very early age.
How old were you?
About 12.
Which one did you belong to?
Hashomer HaTahor, then Akiba, and then Hashahar. When I was at the university, I joined the organization of the Jewish students of the University Jagiellonica, where I was very active, because from time to time we had anti-Semitic excesses at the university, and we had to be organized, and we were. And we were demonstrating and walking. Unfortunately, at one of such a demonstration, one of my colleagues, a medical student, was killed. When I was on the 3rd year of my studies, because of the anti-Semitic excesses, my department was closed.
What department was that?
Department of Philosophy. And in order not to lose too much time, my father decided that I should go to Vienna and perhaps get some more additional education there if possible. I went to my professor, Professor Vukadinovich, and I asked him whether it would be possible at this early stage to give me a title for my master thesis so I could start writing there. And so he did. And I went to University of Vienna, and I enrolled there for 1 year. And to my great surprise, when my father took me there, before I did anything, I already saw in the big lobby downstairs the insignia of the anti-Semitic Viennese students displayed there, like swords and those hats. But I spent a very lovely year in Vienna. I studied and I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of people. Then I came back and I graduated. My thesis was finished in Krakow. It was accepted. I defended it. And then after a little while, I met my future husband.
When you were younger, before university days, were you aware of anti-Semitism, as you recall?
To a certain extent, I saw and heard and read about it. Personally, before I got to the university, I personally was never physically touched, but I was at the university when they tried to push the Jewish students to one side, to the left side. And they tried to push me too. Of course, we didn't want to go. And so one of the students said to me, listen, we don't like Jews, but we like Jewish girls, so please just go. We won't do anything. Well, I didn't go. So they had sticks and canes, and I came home. I remember I had a sport coat made out of woolen material. I came home with a big hole in the back. That's where they stuck the stick into me. They didn't hurt me, but my future brother-in-law was hurt. He was a medical student, and I remember we were demonstrating once in front of the university, and lo and behold, my future brother-in-law, I didn't know he's going to be my brother-in-law, was thrown from the top of the stairs from the university all the way down, and he was bleeding.
This is about 1936, 37?
No, that was before. That
Before
was
that?
like, yes, 1933, 4.
33 and 4.
Yeah.
And so you experienced some anti-Semitism.
Don't forget, I must say that there was a numerus clausus at the university. And the rule was that no more than 10% of students can attend certain faculties, certain departments. The worst was medical school, of course, and no more than 10%, and sometimes less than that, were accepted. The other departments like the School of Law or Philosophy or others did not go strictly by that.
Did you discuss this in your home?
Absolutely, of course. Yeah. We were very much Zionist-oriented, and we worked for it. We were active. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You told me that you had a friend who made Aliyah to Israel.
He really didn't make, well, it's not the formal Aliyah. After he got his law degree, he went to Israel. He was our leader in our organization. His name was Dr. Moses Pomeranz. He went to Israel. He was an attorney. He opened 2 offices, one in Jerusalem and one in Tel Aviv. He got married there, and he had 4 or 5 children, and he died suddenly at the age of 42.
Mm-hmm. Was there a thought that perhaps you would go to Israel, or anybody in your family?
Well, there was a personal thought and great idealism, but I don't think my parents would have ever permitted me to do that. As a matter of fact, I wanted to study dentistry, but because there was no School of Dentistry in Krakow, I would have to go either to Warsaw or to Vienna, and my parents objected to that, so I didn't go.
Did you have any sisters or brothers?
I had one brother who was 10 years younger than I.
Mm-hmm. And so you were an only child for 10 years?
For a long time, yes.
Very protected?
Very protected, very much loved.
You
I'm very
also
happy.
came from a family with means. The family had a factory.
No, my husband's family.
Your husband's
Right.
family.
No, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather was one of the oldest Jewish merchants in Krakow. And he organized, and he started an organization of Jewish merchants in Krakow, of which he was the president. His name was Solomon Lustbader. He was very well known in the city. And my paternal grandfather was a landowner in the eastern part of Galicia. As a matter of fact, he and his brother inherited a whole village, Czerniaty, near Horodenka. And they were really people of the earth. And there was a very, very healthy stock. And I think that, thank God, maybe I inherited that from my father's family. My paternal great-uncle, a brother of my grandmother, was Dr. Max Engel, who lived in Yugoslavia. He was the chief rabbi of Yugoslavia until the war. And he was killed with his wife and his only son, who was a lawyer there in Zagreb. So, where are we now?
You were telling me about your family.
Yes.
And what it was like growing up in Poland, in Krakow. So you lived in affluent circumstances?
I think so.
And you had lots of family
I wasn't
gatherings?
aware of it at the time, but looking back, perhaps a lot was offered to me in the way of education, upbringing, and other nice things in life.
But nevertheless, you were aware of the problems of anti-Semitism
Yes.
in
Yes.
Poland at the time.
Yes, I was.
How else did it manifest itself to you? How else were you aware of it, aside from your own problems in the university?
Well, first of all, by reading the very famous problem of the stragans. I don't know how to translate it into English, when the Jewish people were bringing their goods once a week to the city square, in the small places. The anti-Semitic people used to turn them over, beat them up. And, of course, in the press and what was going on in the whole country, we were very much aware of it. And that gave us the impetus to work harder for Israel, to be more organized, to go out to the people and tell them that, and take action, and we did.
Now, this anti-Semitism, the way you saw it, was it particularly Polish, or was there already some idea of Hitler in Germany?
Hitler in Germany came much later. I was already a grown woman, and we are very much aware of it. We listened to the speeches. Unfortunately, at that time, what I resented mostly, and I could feel it, I couldn't say for sure. People were saying he's crazy. And I said, he may be crazy, but he's dangerous. Unfortunately, it turned out to be so. Yes, we listened to Hitler's speeches, we knew what happened, and in 1934, a lot of people from Auschwitz, where I used to live, were thrown over the border and came. They were Polish Jews who lived in Germany without being German citizens. They were peddlers, and they were going back and forth. Well, anyway, whoever found himself at that time on the other side of the German border was sent back to Auschwitz. And then we organized help for them. We took them in, and the Jewish families took them in. We divided them. We fed them, we clothed them, when we saw to it that they somehow will be re-established in the city.
You were already married at this time?
Yes,
because
absolutely.
you moved from Krakow to Auschwitz.
To Auschwitz in 1936.
When you got married.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there. Mm-hmm. And this is also the place where, for the first time in my life, I really saw the Jewish poverty so close. Mm-hmm. Having lived in Krakow, I knew about it, but I truly never had a chance to come that close to it and to observe it. My husband was the president of the Jewish community in Auschwitz, and he had a very well-organized Jewish community there, and I joined groups of ladies who worked for the poor Jewish people there. And I remember one whom I befriended very closely. It was Mrs. Vulkan, a beautiful Orthodox lady, a wife of a very prominent Jewish citizen of Auschwitz. She was one, and the other one was Mrs. Druks. She was the wife of Dr. Ira Druks, who was a prominent Zionist, and Zionist leader in my part of the country. He died in Israel. And so we worked very hard for the poor children, especially children. We used to take them to the public bath once a week. We saw to it that their clothes, that they got clean clothes. We washed their hair and did everything that was possible for them. That was in Auschwitz, pre-war Auschwitz. Auschwitz was a very interesting community. It was a small community of about, I think, 16,000, with the majority of Jewish population. It was very unique in Poland. A lot of the Jews were traveling peddlers. They were going back and forth with goods. They used to come on Friday home, and you could smell the Shabbos going on all over the city.
And your husband's family lived in Auschwitz?
My husband's family came to Auschwitz in the 18th century from Slovakia. My husband's great-grandfather was invited by one of his colleagues at the University of Prague to come and visit Auschwitz for the summer, and he did. He met a girl there, he fell in love with her, and he settled there. That was Simon Haberfeld. His son Jacob Haberfeld was born in Auschwitz, and he founded the firm Jacob Haberfeld, which is in existence until now.
So they were very active in Jewish activity.
They were very active. They built the first big shul there. They built the first big Jewish school, which was called the Heder. And they were very, very active in the Jewish community.
Was there the same degree of anti-Semitism in Auschwitz as there was in Krakow?
Well, maybe there was, but truly I lived there only for a very short time, from 1936 to 1939. I didn't feel it very much over there, but I heard about it, that there was no university there. There was no special place where the Jews could be attacked. And I must say that while I was there already in Auschwitz, my husband was decorated by the government with a Silver Cross of Merit as one of the very few Jews in Poland that I know of, and perhaps maybe the only one, for social work, for what he has been doing for the community.
And what were you hearing about Nazism during that period?
Well, we were hearing terrible stories, what was happening in Germany. We were very much aware of it. But somehow we thought it's going to be contained where it was. Everybody was concerned, but nobody truly thought it will spill over and get us all. And so when my husband decided that we will be going to the United States, to the World's Fair, there was a little problem in our family because my father thought we shouldn't go, and my husband was very firm about it, that we should go, that nothing will happen, and if something will happen, it will be after we will have returned, and all the arrangements have been made, we should go. And so we left. And we never got back again.
When did you leave?
We left in July of 1939. Went to the World's Fair. And we met a group of people on the ship. We traveled on the Batory, which was a luxury liner, Polish luxury liner, that was traveling in the summer between Poland and Hoboken, and in the winter from New York to Florida. And a wonderful time on the boat. As a big surprise, we happened to meet on the boat the ship surgeon who was my husband's schoolmate. And so that made it even nicer. And we came to the United States, to the World's Fair, where my husband was exhibiting his goods in the Polish pavilion. We made a side trip to Niagara Falls, and we spent a few days there. And then we were leaving, as planned, for Poland. Now, that was in New York, and a lot of people who didn't go back met us at the boat. They wanted to see who is going and who is not going. A lot of people that came with us remained in New York in view of...
What was the day? Had the war broken out already?
No. But there was already a great tension, and they said that any minute something can happen. Well, my husband said, I am going because I have everything and everybody there. So no matter what, we are going. And sure enough, a small group of our people left. About 48 hours before we reached the port of Gdynia, we were watching a movie. One night was a movie, one night was a dance. That night was a movie with Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. I remember vividly. The film was interrupted, and the purser came on the stage, and he asked to please be quiet and control yourself. He has something to announce. And the announcement said that our ship no longer is going to Poland, but has been taken by the British Admiralty, and we are heading toward some place we didn't know where. I don't think he knew where either. Well, what was happening there I'll never forget. Women were getting hysterical, screaming, crying. Men were fainting. It was something terrible. And I was sitting like a stone. I just couldn't move. There were a whole group of Polish priests and nuns traveling. And they all got on their hands and knees, and they gave first aid to those who fainted. And since that time on, our odyssey started. We never made it home. And our ship was taken by the British Admiralty first to Scotland, to Inverness. And after a few days, they took us to Newcastle on Tyne. Truly, they didn't know what to do with us. We didn't.
Now, the war had already started,
Yes.
therefore.
The war had already started. When we were in Newcastle, the bombs were falling because it's a big shipyard there. And we were stranded on that Polish ship. The British authorities didn't know what to do with us. We were not legally there. We were on, as far as they were concerned, we were on the high sea. We couldn't get down because nobody had a British visa. And so we stayed on that boat for 6 weeks. And it was really bad. Both mentally and physically. There was no more soap, food, no money, because everybody spent all the money in the United States, and the few Polish zlotys we had in our pockets were not worth anything. And no newspapers, no news what's going on. The only one who could get off the boat from our group was the mashgiach, the kosher supervisor, who was the member of the crew, and he was going down every day from the boat to the city to bring a newspaper to us. There were conferences and dealings going on between our group and the British authorities. It was impossible to stay on the sea any longer. And while we were staying on the boat, they started to repaint it, putting coats of the warship colors. And as a matter of fact, Báthory eventually left and sank at Narvik. But we were there, and as the result of the dealings with the British authorities, and I helped as an interpreter, we made out a deal with them that they would let us down to the city, and Jewish families agreed to take Jewish passengers into their homes. The Christian families and some monasteries agreed to take the Christian passengers. And so we landed in Newcastle on Tyne when the war was going on. We stayed there as long as we had to. Some of the people who had relatives in the United States contacted them, and they were sending tickets to go back. But in the beginning, they couldn't even do that because we only had a one-time visitor's visa. And the American government said they were here already, they left, that's it, period. Well, it took another while to negotiate with the United States representatives. And finally, with the help of my husband and other wonderful people, we worked out a deal that our one-time visa was transformed into multiple visitors' visa, so that whoever could go back to the United States could go. And so quite a few people left, and they went to their families in the United States. And we were one of the last ones to leave because we didn't have any family in the United States, and we also didn't have any money for the tickets. And so I'm just going to make a long story short. We started to sell out whatever was of any value on us and with us, and eventually we bought 2 tickets to the United States. And by the end of December 1939, We boarded the ship Britannia from Liverpool, and we eventually, after a stormy voyage, during which like 14 ships were sunk on the way, we made it to the United States. And lo and behold, you wouldn't believe it, and guess where we landed? On Ellis Island.
Mm.
And we stayed there. I really would like to tell you a little bit about Ellis Island because people have the most horrible conception about the place. My reaction was that that was the most wonderful place on earth if you don't have a place to go. We were taken care on Ellis Island by the Hyas. And we had wonderful kosher meals there. The place is spotless. It's absolutely the cleanest place on earth. You had to be clean. You had to take showers every day. Each day we had clean linens on our cots. Each time you went to the bathroom, you had to wash your hands, take a clean towel, and throw it away. Each time, everything was absolutely beautiful. We met wonderful people there from all over the world, among others, Mr. Finkelstein, who was the editor of the Jewish Hind in Warsaw. And so we spent our time there really very interestingly. Social workers were taking care of us. They brought us some things to embroider, some material to read. I made a little bathroom rug, which I kept as a souvenir. And one by one, people were leaving, but we didn't. We had no place to go. So the only person we have known in America was my husband's cashier's brother, whom we contacted when we came for the first time here because the brother sent some little souvenirs for his wife and for his brother. And so we met them once in a restaurant, and we gave them the souvenirs, and we spent a nice evening. And so since we had nobody else, we contacted them. And they came to Ellis Island, and we told them what happened. I think they might have known it before. And what do we do now? Well, Willie Hoffman and Regine came, and Willie had an idea that there is some kind of a organization of Jews from Poland. And he got the telephone number, and my husband called there. He introduced himself and presented his credentials, who he was. And Mr. Tannenbaum, who was, I remember the name, who was then the president of this organization, came to Ellis Island. And he promised that the organization would put up a bond for us so that we may be able to leave. And really, a few days later, somebody came and they told us that we are free to go. And at that point, I got hysterical. I said, where are we going? We have no place to go. I don't want to go. I want to stay here. Well, we couldn't stay here because it was just not a place to stay. And Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman very graciously invited us to their little home in Laurelton, in Long Island. And they gave us their son's room to stay, and the son slept in the living room. He's now a professor at the university in New York, and that's where we stayed.
Now, you had lost in this period all contact with Krakow and with Auschwitz.
No, I didn't.
You
I
have
really
contact
didn't.
still?
I still had contact. That was 1940. And as a proof of that, I have a postal card that my father wrote. It was written on the 19th of May, 1940, from Krakow.
It was sent to Ellis Island.
No, it was sent to me, care of Peerless Studio, which was the studio of my friends in New York City.
Interesting.
So I still had contact with my parents. And then in New York, we had to look around what to do. So my first steps were to the New York Public Library. In my naivete, I thought maybe I can get a job there because I was working at the university library. And so I got there, and a very kind gentleman talked to me, and he kind of had pity on me. He knew I didn't know what I was talking about. He said, if you want to work in the library after what you have told me, you'll have to go to library school. Well, so that was the first big disappointment. I thought was the biggest, but it wasn't. So we had to look elsewhere, and I knew that with my degree and with lack of experience, I couldn't get anything in my line. So my hostess, who ran a millinery school, suggested that I should take a millinery course there. I will get a diploma, and maybe I can get a job as a milliner. So I did. And I was diligently attending the course. I was always very handy with the needle. Since I was brought up in a Catholic school, you know, there was a lot of needlework done there. And in the meantime, through some connections, my husband went for an interview to Baltimore. Maybe he can get a job there. And so I stayed on in New York, and I finished my course, and I eventually joined him in Baltimore, where we stayed in 1948 until we decided to go to California.
What kind of work did your husband get in Baltimore?
My husband was a chemist by education. He graduated from the University of Vienna with a degree in chemistry. And he also graduated from the Hochschule für Welthandel, which is School of International Commerce. Since it was since he came from a family of industrialists, his father thought he should have a firm background in that. So he was also a rectifier and chemist rectifier, and since his childhood and for generations they had refineries and liquor factories. So he was a specialist in liquor and whiskeys.
So did he find a job in that
Yes, he
field?
did. He did find a job in a distillery in Baltimore, and that's where we stayed. He had several jobs. As a matter of fact, it's an interesting story. On his third job, he talked his boss in to permit him to produce eggnog. Eggnog was known in this country as a mixture of eggs and milk and maybe a little something in the kitchen. But for industrial purposes, nobody knew how to make eggnog with whiskey that will not separate on the shelf. And my husband introduced that to the American market. He was working then for the Overbrook Company in Baltimore, for the Abrams brothers. And after the first season, Christmas season, my husband called me that he got a big check as a bonus for that eggnog, and he doesn't know what to do. Should he bring it home or should he cash it? I said, don't bring anything home, just go and cash it, bring the money. Anyway, after that, we decided to have a child. We couldn't afford it before because I had to work and he had to work. We were sending packages home and there was very little left. Well, anyway, that was a milestone in our life.
You were sending packages to Poland?
To Poland.
And the packages were still getting through?
Yes, until a certain time when they could not be sent from America anymore. And we contacted through our wonderful friends in Baltimore, a head of the Jewish community in Lisbon. And we were sending him money. And he was sending packages to Poland. And he was sending them until one day we got a letter from him not to send any more money because my parents don't respond anymore. And then we knew that was the end.
Did you hear from people, your parents and other relatives and friends? When you sent the packages, did they send you
Yes,
postcards?
occasionally I did. But I always heard from that wonderful man in Lisbon that he sent and he knows they arrived. But at one point he said no more.
About when was that, in 41?
No, it was like 42.
As late as 42.
Could you tell from the letters that they were sending you what was going on there with them?
Absolutely, I could. As a matter of fact, too bad the card is written in Polish. So you wouldn't understand it. My father says, the only dream of your brother is to go where you are. And why is it that you don't answer my letters? I haven't heard for 2 weeks. We are concerned about you. I hope you are not concerned about us. Something in an open card so it could get through. Oh, we knew exactly what was going on because we had contact with New York, with the American Jewish Congress, World Jewish Congress. We had friends there. We knew what was going on, but we were absolutely helpless. There was nothing we could do from here. We knew. Maybe I knew a little bit more than somebody else because through Dr. Schwarzbad I got terrible, terrible news. He was right in it. He knew.
And I think you said that your father gave you some hints as to what was happening to him when he had to leave Krakow.
Oh, yes. What happened was my parents' home was a corner house, a big house in a very, very lovely neighborhood, and the SS decided to make the headquarters there. And so one day when my father came home, they met him inside and they beat him up. They threw him out of the house, and he had to take my mother and my child and my brother and get out of Krakow, and he went to Bronovice, which is a village not far from Krakow, and they stayed there until they were taken to the ghetto.
In Krakow itself?
Yeah. Outside of Krakow was the ghetto, yes. And so they stayed there until slowly the ghetto was liquidated. My brother was taken to Mauthausen. My father, with my mother's youngest brother, was taken to Belzec, and my mother remained because she was in the hospital. And my child was under the care of my cousin, who was working in the ghetto as an MD. And when my mother came back from the hospital, she took the baby. And one day she was notified that they are coming to get her. So she decided to hide my daughter in the cellar, where coal was stored. Probably because she arranged for someone to take her out. But as they came to take my mother, my daughter started to cry. They went and got her too. And so both were taken in 1942 to Belzec concentration camp, extermination camp, I should say.
How did you know about this? Did you get letters afterwards, or people
I got
who were
some
witnesses?
news from some people from some friends who remained there. And when we, through correspondence, and we were in Poland, I was in Poland with my husband in 1967, and with my son in 1976.
But you didn't know before that exactly what happened.
Yes, I did. Not exactly, but I heard from different sources stories that absolutely confirmed each other. That is what happened. So, my brother was killed 2 days before the liberation of Mauthausen. They chased out those who survived, and they chased them and made them run. But he couldn't run, he was completely emaciated. And so the SS clubbed him. I got this news from from two people. One is my colleague from the university, who spent the whole time with him in the camp, and one from a man I didn't know, who was also became a friend of my brother in Mauthausen.
Now, when you went back to when you went back to Poland. First, you went with your husband, and then you went with your husband and Steve.
No, my husband was not alive anymore.
Oh, I see.
I went with Steve in 1976. My husband passed away in January 1970.
So you went with Steve.
Right.
Where did you go at that time with Steve?
Well, we went to London first, and from London we came to Warsaw. From Warsaw we went to Krakow. From Krakow we went to Auschwitz. From Auschwitz we went to Zakopane, which is a mountain resort. And then from Krakow back to London and back home.
When you went to Krakow and when you went to Auschwitz, what did you look for and what did you find?
Well, I really, on the second trip, I didn't look for anything because I
on
already...
the first trip?
That was the second trip I described. Well, we looked, first of all, for the places where we lived. And it was a complete disaster.
You wanted to show Steve where you had been?
Are we talking about the first or second trip?
Well, the first trip.
Okay, first trip was with my husband.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
And second trip was with Steve. Now,
right, okay,
I think
fine.
you are interested in Steve at the moment.
Either
No.
one. I'm interested
Well,
in Felicia.
with Steve, I went to Poland with Steve at that time, in 76, upon his insistence. He has been bothered by some ideas that he wants to go. I begged him not to go at that time because I was thinking of retiring. And I say, wait until I retire, I'll be much more at ease. I won't be in such a big hurry. No, he said, I want to go. He wanted to go, main of all, he wanted to see where he comes from. And then he wanted to see what happened. And then he wanted to see how it happened. And he saw it all. And I must say that I didn't have the strength to visit the Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camp for the second time. I was there before. And so our former employees made arrangements for him to show a film in English in the concentration camp so he could understand everything. And he took him there. From there he came to the city and we visited the cemetery.
This is Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, which was in the most deplorable condition. I remember he took his jacket off, he had a white shirt on, he rolled up his sleeves. He found the tombstone of my father-in-law and my mother-in-law down, and he tried to pick it up. Of course, we had some friends with us at that time. He tried to, that was granite, he couldn't pick it up. He's a strong man, but he couldn't. And I remember him perspiring and crying and swearing, God damn it, what did they do? Anyway, it was a good experience for him. He visited our home and the factory. He had to have a special permission from the authorities to go into the distillery because it's all under the government supervision. Everybody was extremely nice to him. They didn't know what to do with him and for him. And I'm glad he went.
Are they still using the railroad tracks?
Oh, about the railroad tracks. Beside the distillery business, my husband had other businesses too. And one of them was getting sand and gravel out of the river Sola, which ran through the city. And he was delivering and selling it, delivering it to the Polish railroads for building railroads and repairing them. For that purpose, he had to build a railroad from the Auschwitz railroad station to the River Sola, where the big machinery was standing, and they were sending their own little trucks when this assorted gravel and sand was being delivered to the railroad station. And the same trucks which he built that belonged to him were used by the Nazis to transport people from the station to the concentration camp, which was right nearby. And so it was a big irony and a big tragedy that happened, but it did happen. So.
When you went back on your first time with your husband, which was 1967, you visited Krakow in Auschwitz.
Yes.
And what did you find? You also found everything destroyed, or?
Well, my husband wouldn't permit me to go into my parents' home. I just saw it from the outside. It was a corner house, and the outside was full of holes from the war, and it was not repaired. I went to my grandparents' house where I grew up, and it was in the most deplorable condition. Everything ran down, dirty, broken, terrible.
People living in it?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. There is a great shortage of living quarters. Then we went in Auschwitz. Our house was downstairs. My husband's offices were the headquarters for Auschwitz SS. Mm-hmm. Our home was chopped up into small apartments. And of course, everything was, a lot of things of our furniture remained where it was, and my husband's former chauffeur lived there with his family. A lot of it was gone. And we found out who may have certain things. I still have a big painting of Jan Styka, who is one of the most foremost painters of the Polish painters. He specialized in horses. I have there in my home, in our home, still there. I couldn't take it out, and I don't, in Auschwitz.
Could we see that picture of your little girl?
Certainly. Which one?
Yes. Pick up both of them, these two on the bottom. And the large one as well.
I can't pick up all of them. Oh, in the other
large,
hand?
yes.
Okay.
We'll do them one at a time. Why don't we just hold up?
Yeah, right, right. That's
Can you see
good.
anything?
Uh-huh.
Wow, that's lovely. About how old was she at that time?
About not quite 3. Mm-hmm. She would have been 3 in August, and that was sent in May.
What is her name, Felicia?
Franziska Henrika Haberfeld.
Could we see the large picture now? Beautiful. Okay, thank you so much. Ways of helplessness.
When we realized what was going on with our child and parents and the family, of course we were overcome by the feeling of helplessness, guilt, frustration, and there was very little we could do. Whatever could be done, we had been doing, and then we couldn't do anything anymore. While we were going back from United States to Poland, we met on the ship Pilsudski, a wonderful person who was a stewardess from Denmark. For personal reasons, after she had lost her husband, who was a doctor, she decided to go and work on a ship for a little while. And when we found out what's happening in Poland and what's going to happen to us, she decided that perhaps she could do something to save my child. At one point, she said that when she goes back to Denmark, she will try to find out more about it, whether it is going to be possible, and that she will contact us in Baltimore when she gets back to New York. And surely it happened so. Sometimes after we already have been in Baltimore, my husband was working, she called up and she said, "Please come to New York. I have good news for you." We met her and she said that 2 young men, her friends, will be willing somehow to get to Poland and to get my daughter out. She wouldn't tell us how, what, whatever. She says, trust me. I will try my best. However, it will cost money because I would do it without money. But I am a woman. I can't do what they are going to do. And they said they would do it for $2,000. Well, who had $2,000? Certainly we didn't. So my husband went to his boss, the owner of a refinery, and he presented the problem, and he begged him to loan him the $2,000. He said, I promise that I will work it off, that I will work as long as it's necessary to pay it off. Please help me to save my child. This gentleman thought about it and said to my husband, well, Mr. Haberfeld, I know you now. You are a very nice, capable man, and I know you would do it, what you promised me today, but how do I know that you will be able to do it? Something may happen to you, and you may not be able to give the money back to me. And so the answer is no. And so the last chance was gone. All this happened, unfortunately, before we met our wonderful friends later in Baltimore. And I want to tell you very briefly about it because I think I owe it to them. One day a lady called and she said that she heard that my husband has been working, and she would know, she didn't say that, she said that she heard that we were there and she would like to come to meet us. And she came, a beautiful lady, and she talked to us. He asked us what happened, how. And she said she would like to invite us for dinner next Sunday, that they will pick us up. And we went there. We didn't know exactly who she was. We had an idea because our landlady told us who she was. And we had a wonderful dinner in their mansion in Baltimore, full of servants. And after dinner, this beautiful lady invited us to her study. He sat us down and she said that she understands that my husband has been working. I wasn't at that time. And that he must stop. That he's not allowed to work. That we are on visitor's visa. That we may get into a lot of trouble. And that the Council of Jewish Women, of which organization she was the president at that time, decided already that they are going to support us. To which my husband, who was a very impressive man, I must say, stood up and he said, Mrs. Strauss, nobody's going to support me. As long as I can, I will be working. I have never taken any support from anybody. I think that at that time, he impressed Mrs. Strauss very much because since that time, we became very, very close friends. Several years later, when the time came that the American consul in Canada notified us we should come and get our American visa. We received a lot of forms and papers to fill out before we went, and some questions read like, are you working? What is your social security number? What is the name of the company you are employed by? What is your yearly salary? Well, we didn't know what to do. Everything had to be answered, and whatever was to be answered would be illegal. Well, we counseled with Aunt Julia, and she said, you have to go and see Simon Sobolov. He will help you. And so we made an appointment with Simon Sobolov, who lived across the street from us on Utah Place in Baltimore. And we presented our legal problem to him. What do we do? If we say that we are working, we may get in trouble. If we say that we are not working, we are going to lie, and we have to swear under oath that everything in the paper is true. Well, Simon Sobolov, who is one of the finest legal minds in the United States, a former judge and Solicitor General of the United States, listened to us. He knew us from before, and he said, you fill out the paper and tell the truth. Answer all the questions the way they really are. Should you get in trouble for telling the truth, I will defend you. But if you lie, don't ever come back to me. You are on your own. And so with heavy hearts, we went to Canada, and we went to the consulate. The consul was a very nice gentleman. He read the papers very carefully. And then he talked to my husband, and he said, Mr. Haberfeld, I see from your papers that you have been working. Oh my gosh, my heart sank. I knew, that's it. He said, yes, sir, I have been working. He said, and what exactly are you doing? What is your specialty? You just briefly mentioned something, a chemist, rectifier, superintendent of production. What are you doing? So my husband explained everything, what he was doing. And he says, and this is your salary that you put down? He says, yes, it is. He says, you know what? When you go back to Baltimore, you tell your boss that you are greatly underpaid. You deserve much more than what you are getting. Congratulations, and so on and so forth. And so that was one of the wonderful experiences we had. Just goes to show you that to tell the truth is always good, even if you have done something that wasn't very legal, but if it was done for a good purpose, it's okay. Now,
You've had many experiences, good and bad. Did this affect the way you and your husband raised your son?
well, there was a difference in the way of raising our son between myself and my husband. My husband was trained by a very strict drill, and I was much more liberal than my husband, and so sometimes we had clashes about it. But thank God everything came out all right. My husband was a very strict father, and I was much more lenient mother. So I was the buffer between the two of them, and we raised a wonderful son.
Did your son know as he was growing up about your experiences?
Yes, he knew it. since he was 7. He knew it because that was the time when we started the 1939 club, and my husband and I and 10 other people were the co-founders of the club. And so he really grew up among survivors, knowing all about them, hearing day and night what was going on, about the good and not so good things, how they were making their new life, and he knew all about it. My husband saw to it that in a very acceptable way, he was serving my son all the bad news, what happened, so that he could understand it. And he said, there is nothing to hide. We have to tell him, he has to know. In 1961, on our first trip to Europe, we took our son to Israel and to other countries, but mainly to Israel. That was the time of the Eichmann trial. Mm-hmm. Through some friends, my husband came to the hotel one day. He said, I got 2 tickets to the trial for tomorrow. Do you want to go? I said, no. He says, I'm glad because I really don't want you to go, but I want Stephen to go. He was then 16 and a half years old. He took Stephen to the trial, and they sat through the whole day. And among others, I was told that there was a Jewish woman testifying in Yiddish. My son does not understand Yiddish. But he was so impressed and sick of it through the body language, through her screaming, through her agony, through the type of her testimony, that he came home that evening to the hotel completely pale. He was sick in his stomach all night. He was throwing up. And I think he didn't talk much, but I think that made a lasting impression upon him. Because even though he didn't understand the words of the woman testifying, he did understand the tragedy. And he touched it firsthand, because whatever we told him, whatever he saw on television, whatever books we brought home, I felt that maybe it's still in his fantasy. Maybe yes, maybe not. How could something like that happen? He was too young maybe to perceive it all in reality. But this one woman, I think, did it for all of us and for him. He's very much aware. He is very much impressed by the way people came out of it. He still cannot understand it fully. How can people who went through such hell come out of it and the world expects them to be sane and normal and live and have homes the way they have it and the way they live and the families? He's impressed by the young people. A lot of them are Harvard graduates or other fine school graduates, doctors, lawyers, accountants, all kinds of professional people, from those people who were driven insane by torture and hunger and atrocities. Such children can live and be. He's very much impressed. He has a lot of respect for all of them. I think that he came a full cycle when he became a father himself. Then he really understood what it means to love a child, to lose a child, God forbid. The tragedy of a war, of separation, of helplessness. And maybe that's why he respects me more. I don't.
I think it's something that all of us have learned from you and from all the people in the 1939 Club. A great deal of respect for how people can cope with these things. And it's our privilege to listen to you. You don't think so, but we for us it's a privilege.
You know, sometimes I can't believe it happened. I can't believe that it really happened. And I can't believe that I can survive it. It's all like it's happening outside of me. Mm-hmm. It's a very complex feeling. How can I absorb it? And yet I did. I did a lot of things that happened that I did in spite of it. It must be the self-preservation feeling or something starts sticking where everything else fails. How much more beating can one take? A lot.
Do you find that what you went through affects how you live today?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It does, it did, it does, and it will forever. Absolutely. I realize that as long as Jews will have a country and take a stand, they will be able to take a stand. And that nothing like that can ever happen again, because they will not permit it. Unfortunately, it wasn't like that before. And we had no representatives, and we were caught, but not now anymore. And so I just dedicated part of my life to that cause, because it must never happen again, period. There will be no more excuses of helplessness, because we are strong, and we have to stay strong.
You're very active now.
I am. I'm as active as I can, and I hope to remain active, because that's all that remains. What else is there? Another Holocaust? Another slaughter? Never again.
Felicia, tell me about some of the things that you're doing now. You're involved in some activities connected with Israel.
Well, I work mainly for the 1939 Club, and that's my main area of interest. And we do wonderful things there. We have wonderful people. Tomorrow we have a luncheon, and it's the only fundraising function of our organization during the year. And we have selected 2 institutions in Israel to collect money for tomorrow. One is the Association for Welfare of Soldiers of Israel, which can be compared to the American USO during World War II. And the other one is the Beit Halohem. It's the Rehabilitation Center for the Wounded War Veterans. And so we are going to raise money, hopefully a lot of money tomorrow for that cause. Each time we raise money for a different cause tomorrow, those 2 in connection with Israel's independence that we celebrate tomorrow. The board felt that we have to salute our soldiers who keep that country independent and free. So it's going to be for them. See, before we had no army. We had nobody to defend us, nobody to speak for us. Now we have an army, thank God. Hopefully we won't have to use it. But as the old Roman proverb goes, si vis pacem para bellum, if you want peace, prepare for war. Unfortunately, Israel has to be prepared for war, but hopefully there will be no war. But we have a place to go. We have an army to defend us. We have people to speak for us. And so hopefully nothing will happen to us. Nothing like that for sure.
I thank you very much for sharing this.
Thank you.